Jared Weiss,
And I'm Alex Benson.
and we are Ethereal Sunrise. We are here today to talk about Steady as a Rock, the second song off of our debut album, Steady as Rock. No relation. The album and song are both available on every major music download and streaming platform that we are aware of. And we're excited to tell you a little bit about the song today. Just to give everyone sort of an overview, since this is the first time we're talking about the album at large, the design kind of for this album was that we would each write three songs individually, and then we would write three songs together. And this is the first song on the album written solely by Alex Benson. So I'm really going to put him on the spot here. So, Alex, what the hell were you thinking?
Well, this was actually the last of my individual compositions that I wrote for this album. And so it was very much written to be complementary to everything else that was on the album. Um, and so there were things that I wanted it to do that maybe weren't being done by the other songs, and things that were being done by other songs I didn't necessarily want this one to do. So there are things like many of the songs on the album sort of have a bit of a dark or ominous quality. So I wanted this to be a little bit brighter. I wanted it to be a little bit more mid-tempo versus a lot of the sort of faster songs that were on the album. And I just wanted it to be kind of brighter in tone than many of the sort of more minor key latent songs that we had on the album. So I brightened it slightly to a dominant key. Um, the other things, I mean, from a rhythmic perspective, I think this is the only song on the album that's just in 4/4 and doesn't have any time signature changes in the whole song. And so it was sort of wanting to make something that was a little bit more accessible and a little bit more straightforward rhythmically, and a little more groove bass, a bit more blues bass, and sort of drawing on a lot of kind of classic rock influences from the 60s and 70s. The actual initial sort of spark for the song was from some of my perhaps less traditional influences, a lot of kind of Japanese composers, actually, because I sort of grew up with in the video game generation and the anime generation. So I have some of that influence as well. So that was actually sort of the initial spark of the idea for that main riff and the sort of the use of the bass throughout the song. And it was just sort of taking it from there. This was sort of a looser composition compared to the others. And it was just sort of what sort of sounds good leading into from one step to the next. And again, a lot of sort of blues influence in the writing of the parts. And as I was sort of stringing things together, I was finding in terms of the arrangement that having it that every time that main riff comes in with being the main melody there didn't really work, because it just would have wound up being sort of too long and not having a lot of momentum. So I decided to sort of free it up, and just sort of think, well, what sounds good in this particular moment? And that's where all of the sort of the flute coming in and out, and the guitar coming in and out, and the sort of vocal ad libs coming in and out, and all of those sorts of things just sort of loosely progressing wound up being sort of the sort of hook to the song that's also makes it very distinct from the rest of the album. Melodically, there's a lot of classic rock influences. There's definitely some Steely Dan influence in the main line. This was a song where I was finding I got to do some of the blues screaming, which is always a lot of fun, going back to from Little Richard and all of his successors. So there was definitely some Blood, Sweat, and Tears and Deep Purple influence on the sort of vocal ad-libbing in there. And also almost a kind of a Roy Orbison approach of let's make a song that sort of sounds like it flows naturally, but it is actually kind of weird in the arrangement of its parts, that, again, wound up giving it, I think, a rather unique flavor.
Hmm. It's interesting because as you noted, you ended up writing this last of the ones you contributed to the album, but it ends up having a pretty focal point early in the album. It's the second song on the album. It precedes a lot of the material that is a little more intricate, a little more ominous, as you say. Certainly more tightly wound in my view later on. This is maybe the lightest and most playful song on the album. Um, and I'm curious kind of what your thoughts are about, for something that was so reactive, ending up having a position much more at the forefront.
hmm Well, yeah, I think it provides a little bit of a window that maybe we're not taking ourselves too seriously. As I think, if you only listen to some of the songs later on the album, maybe you get that impression. But definitely there's a bit more playfulness to this song. And even lyrically, the fact that the song is called "Steady as a Rock," which I sort of hit upon almost coincidentally, and it was a phrase that came into my mind. And I was like, well, that's a hilarious name for a rock and roll song. Um, and so it was from that we're like, well, if the song is "Steady as a Rock," um, you know, I know you like the notion of "Steady as Rock" as the album title, and I was questioning, should we make the song "Steady as Rock"? And it's like, well, the lyric is "Steady as a Rock," and it doesn't seem quite right to do that. So that wound up making it the almost title track of the album.
Right, right. And thankfully, I think the inclusion of the A there is very important, because now no one will ever get confused about the two.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
And that was definitely what we were thinking about when we did that.
Right. Our goal throughout the entire making of this album was to confuse the audience as little as possible,
hmm
which is why we definitely didn't do all kinds of weird things with time signatures and song structures. Um, I know that you are more of a fan of, I think, writing the music than the lyrics, but do you want to talk a little bit about the lyrics for this one?
Yeah. So I think the lyrics, I oftentimes tend to write in these sort of abstract um, themes, big themes. With this song, it was a little bit more sort of based off of personal experience. This was from a time in my life where I was doing a lot of traveling and sort of feeling a lot of kind of instability about things. And so it was the sense of needing to feel kind of steady internally in a world in which you're kind of constantly shifting to places. So there's a lot of allusions to different places in the lyrics. There's the city full of bridges, which is just sort of an allusion to Pittsburgh, and driving through New England in the midst of a blizzard, and all those sorts of things. So those experiences were the frame of feeling kind of like life is chaotic and sort of needing to feel some sense of internal stability.
Mhm. Though I know it obviously was not written or designed for this purpose, and for an album released in 2020, I think the focus on internal steadiness in a turbulent world around us is apt, to say the least.
Yeah,
Uh,
although hopefully people aren't traveling as much right now.
yes, please, everyone, try not to travel. Follow your state restrictions. Wear masks. You didn't know this, but this is a PSA. Um, um, we are not on any government's payroll. Anyway, I was on bass. I did some backing vocals. You pretty much did the rest. I'm trying to remember the sequence in which things got recorded, because for a lot of the songs we kind of were going back and forth recording different parts of different songs. You'd be working on one song, I'd be working on the other. I think this is one of the earlier ones I worked on, at least on bass. This was also at a time where I was really, and this was your direction to do this one without a pick, and I was interested in trying to move away from the pick as a crutch for bass playing. Not that there isn't a good use for it in certain circumstances, but being able to do kind of a walking bass pattern really allowed me to start developing kind of my pickless bass technique. Um, you had guided me. You mentioned some of the Japanese influences. There was one song, "Lithium Flower," that you particularly suggested I use as a reference, by Scott Matthews, I think, and that's from one of the Ghosts in the Shell,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, in
It's from
which
the television show. Yeah.
right. Incidentally, we have a Spotify playlist right now, which includes that song. So if you want to find that in our social media pages, what have you, you can check out that song. And while you're at it, there may or may not be one or two of our songs snuck in there that play counts are good for. So I'll drop that there. It was the first minute or minute and a half of the song, the bass part was composed, and then for the rest of the quote unquote A sections, the kind of A flat, F sharp, B, C sharp chord pattern. You said do whatever you want, just make it walking. And so my process there was basically I would do one pattern at a time, covering those those chords, and then stop, see how it sounded, and then say, okay, how can I sequence kind of these, I guess it's 4-bar, 8-bar, 4-bar parts. I'm doing some counting in my head. I would do one of these 4-bar parts at a time, then move on to the next one. Say, okay, how can I build or expand or change up kind of the feel with each successive 4-bar section without losing that walking backbone. And I think that contributed, I think, to the sense of playfulness that comes out in this song. It was a ton of fun for me to play. It's not a difficult part by any stretch, but just nice to get more comfortable with that kind of bass playing technique. I think we've probably talked people's ears to death, and we recommend removing the sound of our voices from your brain by listening to the songs instead. So again, you can check it all out on any major music streaming or download platform. Just search Ethereal Sunrise Steady as Rock to find the whole album, or find Steady as a Rock the song. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. You can also find us there for updates about the album, our future projects, as well as links to a lot of those aforementioned platforms. I think that's all for us for now. Again, I'm Jared.
And I'm Alex. And we are Ethereal Sunrise.
There you go.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
So I've got to be steady as a rock. So I've got to be